Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. You know those really intense urges, the ones you feel sometimes around money,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe it's that sudden pull, to buy something you absolutely didn't need 5 minutes ago.
Right, or maybe it's just constantly checking things.
Yeah. Or that constant need to check your investment app, maybe.
Yeah.
Or just that nagging anxiety that somehow always loops back to your financing.
Yeah, that background hum.
Exactly. So what if those weren't just like a simple lack of willpower?
What if it was something else entirely?
Yeah, what if they were something more fundamental, something wired deep in your brain, almost like
Yeah.
a wave you feel compelled to ride?
That's exactly the territory we're exploring today. We're taking a deep dive into the fascinating neuroscience of money cravings.
Like,
We're going to look at how they function, you know, biologically, why they feel so incredibly powerful, and crucially, what practical brain-based steps you can actually take to manage them effectively.
and we've got a fantastic stack of sources guiding us for this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We've pulled together insights from neuroscience research, psychological studies, expert perspectives.
Yeah, really cutting edge stuff.
And what these sources seem to reveal is that financial desires aren't some vague personal failing. They operate through, like, identifiable neural pathways.
Exactly. And the really hopeful part, the science says these pathways can be systematically retrained.
That's the key takeaway.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to really peel back the layers in this material. We want to understand why money cravings have such a strong grip,
Hmm.
explore the specific brain circuits involved. There's this key area, the thalamus, we'll get into. It's surprisingly central.
The thalamus, okay.
And then really drill down into the practical, easy to understand techniques that the research shows can genuinely help you silence those crave waves and build a lasting sense of financial freedom.
Get ready for some significant aha moments, I think. We're going to cover what's literally happening in your brain when one of these crave waves hits.
Right.
How money cravings are actually quite unique compared to, say, food or substance cravings.
Which is fascinating in itself.
Yeah. Understand why some people seem much more susceptible than others. And then we're jumping straight into immediate fixes you can use, like right in the moment.
Things you can do now.
Exactly. Strategies to actively change your thinking and behavior, and even lifestyle adjustments that lay a foundation for control. And is all grounded in the science from our sources.
Yeah, it's really about shifting the focus, isn't it? Away from just blaming yourself for maybe a lack of willpower to actually empowering yourself with an understanding of your brain's architecture and how to work with it, not against it.
Okay, so let's start with that fundamental question, the why. Why do these financial cravings feel so overwhelming?
Well, the sources we have make it abundantly clear. This isn't just about strength or, moral fiber.
Right, not just try harder.
No. Financial cravings are the result of these really complex interactions deep within your brain. They involve ancient evolutionary survival circuits.
Survival circuit.
Yeah, think basic needs, safety, getting tangled up with the demands of our very modern world. And it's all filtered through your individual brain differences.
So old wiring meets new pressures.
Precisely. And what's particularly striking in the research is the finding that these cravings can actually hijack some of the very same brain circuits involved in, say, drug addiction.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
It is, but that comparison is key because it helps remove the stigma, It tells us this isn't just a personal weakness, it's a powerful biological process happening.
Okay.
But the crucial follow-up, the hopeful part, is that understanding how these circuits get involved gives us the blueprint for retraining them.
So understanding is the first step to changing.
Exactly. And a central player in this process, highlighted repeatedly in the sources, is the thalamus.
The thalamus. Okay, I've heard of it, but maybe I don't fully grasp its role in something like money cravings. Tell us more about this central relay station.
Yeah, think of the thalamus as like the brain's major hub or filtering station. It's this structure, maybe walnut-sized, deep in the center of your brain.
Okay.
Its main job is to process and filter pretty much all incoming sensory info, what you see, hear, feel, taste, touch, and a lot of emotional information too.
Before it reaches our conscious thought.
Exactly. Before sending it up to the cerebral cortex, where your conscious awareness and rational thinking happen, the research mentions it's incredibly complex, containing something like 60 distinct nuclei.
60. Wow.
Yeah, each specialized for handling different kinds of information.
So it's like the brain's air traffic control for all the incoming signals.
That's a great analogy, a very sophisticated one. Now, for our topic today, The sources pinpoint one specific nucleus within the thalamus as particularly critical for money-related decisions. It's called the mediodorsal nucleus.
Mediadorsal nucleus. Got it.
This specific area acts as a vital connection point in a circuit that's highly relevant to cravings. It receives powerful signals from your emotional centers.
Like the amygdala.
Exactly. Areas like the amygdala, which processes fear and strong emotions, and the ventral striatum, a key player in the brain's reward system, heavily involved in anticipating pleasure and motivation.
So raw emotional and reward signals from the deeper parts of the brain get routed through this specific spot in the thalamus.
That's right. And the mediodorsal nucleus then relays these signals up to your prefrontal cortex.
The thinking part.
Yes, the part right behind your forehead responsible for executive functions. Planning, decision-making, impulse control, rational thought. It's where you're supposed to weigh the pros and cons and make considered choices.
Okay, so ideally the thalamus acts as a nice, calm filter, passing the emotional info gently to the rational part.
That's the ideal scenario. But here's the problem the research identifies, and it's critical for understanding cravings. When this specific circuit, the one involving the mediodorsal nucleus, becomes hyperactive. Yeah, maybe due to stress or triggers or just individual differences. Those signals from the emotional and reward centers aren't just calmly relayed, they can get amplified. They become overwhelming.
Amplified.
Which means even relatively small financial triggers, seeing an ad, feeling a bit stressed, can bypass or just completely overpower the rational prefrontal cortex.
Making it hard to think straight.
Exactly. Creating these intense, almost irresistible urges to spend or to check finances compulsively or even just to obsess about money.
That's like the air traffic control starts shouting instead of guiding, making it impossible for the control tower, the prefrontal cortex, to make a calm decision. And this connects directly to this idea of crave waves.
It does. The sources use that term crave waves to describe the neurological cycle behind these craving episodes. They're not just random sparks. They are predictable, rhythmic patterns. The research calls them oscillatory patterns involving multiple brain networks interacting.
Rhythmic patterns in the brain.
Yeah. Studies cited in the material show that people experiencing strong cravings actually spend more time in certain positive craving network states. It's like specific brain regions are more connected in a way that seems to amplify the craving sensations.
So the brain itself gets into a state that makes the craving feel stronger. It feeds itself.
That's one interpretation from the research, yeah.
Fair enough.
Kind of self-reinforcing process. But here's where the science offers immense hope.
Okay.
These waves, these intense neurological episodes, they typically have a natural lifespan. They tend to peak and then subside within about 15 to 20 minutes if they are left uninterrupted.
15 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a really critical piece of information. They will pass on their own if you could just ride them out for that short time.
Exactly. It feels like forever in the moment, but neurologically, it's often relatively brief.
So what are the typical phases these waves go through?
The research describes a pretty common pattern. Usually starts with trigger activation. Something internal, like a feeling or a thought, or external, like seeing an ad or getting an email, kicks it off.
Got it. Trigger.
This leads to limbic amplification. Those emotional centers we talked about light up and amplify the signal. Then comes cognitive processing. Your mind starts engaging with the craving, maybe rationalizing, maybe planning how to satisfy it.
The thinking kicks in.
Right. And finally, provided you don't act on it, there's eventual resolution. That's where the neurological activity settles back down and the intensity of the urge diminishes.
Trigger, amplification, thinking, and then resolution, if you wait.
That's the cycle. So the battle isn't necessarily making the urge disappear instantly, but navigating through that 15-20-minute peak, knowing it will naturally recede.
Precisely. Understanding this timing is just fundamental to applying effective techniques later on.
Definitely. Now, the sources also highlight something interesting. Money cravings are surprisingly unique. They differ significantly from, say, a craving for a specific food or even a substance.
Really? How so? I mean, a craving feels like a craving, doesn't it?
Not quite when it comes to money. The big difference lies in money's abstract nature and how incredibly multi-layered it is.
Abstract, meaning?
Well, cravings for substances or even basic needs like food are often tied to immediate biological drives or specific neurochemical pathways. Money, though, it's what we call a secondary reinforcement.
Secondary.
Yeah, it doesn't satisfy a direct biological need like hunger or thirst. Its power comes from what it symbolizes and Crucially, what it can be converted into.
Ah, okay. It's a means to an end, but the end could be almost anything.
Exactly. It requires complex cognitive processing involving abstract concepts like symbolism, future planning, even social comparison. The sources point out that a single financial craving can tap into multiple fundamental human needs simultaneously.
Like what?
Well, it can represent survival instincts, think security, shelter. It can represent social status and identity. And it can even be used as a tool for emotional regulation, like buying something to feel better. That's a heavy load for one type of craving to carry.
Wow. So that urge to click buy, or maybe check the stock price again,
Yeah.
it could be this tangled knot of needing security, wanting to feel successful, and trying to soothe anxiety all at once?
That's exactly the complexity the research reveals, and this is why money is often called a meta reward.
Meta reward.
Yeah, because it can be converted into virtually any other reward you can think of. This incredible flexibility, this fungibility, makes financial cravings particularly powerful and persistent. They can represent unfulfilled desires across almost every area of your life, making them incredibly hard to pin down and just dismiss.
Meta reward. I like that framing. It
Mhm.
really captures why it feels so all-encompassing sometimes.
And another fascinating distinction the sources highlight is how money cravings engage the brain's reward system.
Yeah.
While cravings for, say, food or drugs often involve both the wanting system,
The drive to seek it out.
yeah, the drive to seek and pursue the reward, and the liking system, which is the pleasure you get upon receiving the reward. Money cravings primarily activate the wanting system.
So it's more about the chase,
Yep.
the anticipation, the seeking, more than the actual feeling of pleasure from having or spending the money.
Precisely. This helps explain that common paradox, where people can compulsively pursue wealth or engage in endless spending without ever achieving lasting satisfaction or contentment from it.
Because the brain is mainly rewarded by the pursuit itself.
Exactly. The anticipation and the pursuit.
That's a really profound point, and the science backs it up.
It does. The research backs this up specifically regarding dopamine, the key neurotransmitter in the reward pathway. Dopamine release, which drives motivation and that wanting feeling, actually peaks during reward anticipation, not necessarily when you receive the reward itself.
Interesting.
This explains why thinking about potential financial gains or fantasizing about a purchase can often feel more exciting and motivating than the actual experience of receiving the money or owning the item.
The dopamine hit is in the wishing and wanting, not necessarily the having. That's powerful.
It is, and the sources provide specific examples of how context matters here. Using a credit card, for instance, the research shows it activates reward networks more intensely than paying with physical cash.
Really? Why?
Well, the abstract nature of the transaction, removing that physical pain of handing over actual notes, seems to lower the barrier to activating those reward pathways.
Makes sense. Less friction.
Yeah. And similarly, financial decisions made under social observation show entirely different neural activation patterns than private decisions. Our brains are acutely sensitive to social cues and context when money is involved.
That really clicks in the context of social media and online shopping, doesn't it?
Yep.
It's often abstract, payment is delayed, and you're constantly exposed to others' seemingly perfect financial lives.
Exactly. And that leads us directly into understanding who might be more susceptible to these financial crave waves and why. Because while the basic brain circuitry is universal, the research shows that individual susceptibility varies dramatically
Based on what?
based on a combination of personality traits and, importantly, life experiences.
Okay, what kind of personality traits make someone more vulnerable, according to the research?
Well, the sources discuss traits like high neuroticism. Individuals with higher levels of neuroticism might be more prone to using money seeking or spending as a way to manage underlying anxiety, worry, or stress.
Sort of self-medicating with finance.
In a way, yeah. It becomes an attempt, often unconscious, to gain a sense of control or security. Another key trait mentioned is having strong materialistic beliefs, that conviction that possessions and wealth are strongly linked to success, happiness, and self-worth.
If you believe money equals happiness, the cravings will hit harder.
Naturally, yeah. If your core identity is tied up in financial accumulation or display, those financial triggers will feel much more potent.
So it's how your fundamental way of processing the world interacts with these financial triggers. And childhood experiences play a role, too.
A significant one. The research indicates that experiencing childhood financial instability or insecurity can create deep, lasting neural patterns.
How so?
These patterns can actually amplify adult money cravings. They often drive behaviors that are unconscious attempts to finally achieve the sense of security that was missing during those formative years. The brain learns early on that money is tied to safety or danger, and those associations become deeply ingrained.
Wow, that's a heavy burden carried from the past, driving current urges without you even realizing it.
It can be. And compounding this are the environmental and social triggers we navigate daily. Our modern digital environment in particular seems to dramatically amplify these urges.
How?
Think about the constant exposure to curated lifestyle presentations on social media, the sophisticated algorithmic targeting by advertisers who know your browsing history and potential vulnerabilities, and the relentless opportunities for social comparison, seeing what others have, what they're doing, what they appear to be achieving financially.
It feels like our environment is almost actively designed to trigger those financial circuits sometimes.
In many ways, it is. The research shows the brain processes financial peer pressure similarly to other forms of social influence, but it's more complex with money because it simultaneously represents personal achievement and group membership.
Am I keeping up? Do I belong? Is this purchase signaling the right thing about me?
Exactly. It taps into those deep social anxieties.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the sources discuss the profound impact of cultural programming. Culture plays a huge role in shaping both the intensity and the specific ways financial cravings are expressed.
Like how?
Well, societies like many in the West, which are highly individualistic, tend to emphasize personal wealth accumulation, competition, and the display of status through possession.
The classic keeping up with the Joneses.
Precisely. Whereas in contrast, more collectivistic cultures might place more emphasis on family financial security or contributing to communal resources.
So the cultural lens changes the focus.
It does. And the research notes that these cultural differences can actually result in distinct neural activation patterns when people process financial stimuli. It shows how deeply learned associations from our cultural environment can alter fundamental brain responses.
Okay, so your brain's relationship with money isn't just genetics or biology. It's this complex blend of biology, personal history, social environment, and cultural background. Fascinating.
It really is.
All right, we've built a solid understanding of the why and the who. Now, the part everyone really wants to know. How do we actually silence these crave waves? How do we manage them?
Right, the practical stuff. The sources strongly emphasize that effective interventions need to target multiple levels of the brain. You need to combine immediate crisis management with long-term strategies.
Makes sense. You need first aid and preventative care.
Exactly. So let's start with what you can do in the heat of the moment when that wave is building and feels like it's about to crash over you. The sources offer some incredibly practical, immediate techniques.
Lay them out for us. What's the first line of defense when that urge hits?
Okay, the simplest yet maybe most powerful initial step is something called the HALT protocol. It's a quick diagnostic check using an acronym. Ask yourself, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired?
HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Okay, how does checking those help with a financial craving?
The research cited suggests something pretty remarkable. Up to 80% of seemingly financial impulses actually stem from these basic, unmet physical or emotional needs.
80%. Seriously.
Yeah. They aren't necessarily true desires for money or a purchase. They're misdirected signals from your body or mind looking for relief from something else.
So the craving is a symptom, not the root problem in many cases.
Often, yes. And the powerful action here is incredibly simple. Address the underlying state first. If you realize you're hungry, eat a healthy snack. If you're angry, maybe take a quick walk or vent safely. If you're lonely, reach out, call a friend or family member. If you're tired, take a short rest or prioritize getting better sleep later.
Deal with the H, A, L, or T.
Right. The sources indicate that addressing the root cause in many cases makes the financial craving diminish or disappear entirely because its underlying fuel has been removed.
So check HALT before checking out online. That's a fantastic, easy first step. What else for immediate help?
Another wonderful tool, a mindfulness technique for immediate relief, is the 3-minute breathing space. This is specifically designed for moments when you feel overwhelmed by thoughts, emotions, or urges, including financial ones.
Okay, 3 minutes. What are the steps?
It's a 3-step process, dedicating roughly 1 minute to each. Step 1 is checking in. For the first minute, simply pause and ask yourself, okay, how am I doing right now with these money thoughts or this craving? Just notice what's present thoughts, feelings, body sensations, without judgment, without trying to change anything.
Just acknowledge what's there.
Exactly. Step 2 is gathering and anchoring. For the second minute, gently bring your full attention to the physical sensations of your breath. Feel the air entering and leaving your body. Let the breath be your anchor in the present moment, a break from the swirling thoughts.
Focus on the breath.
Step 3 is expanding awareness. For the third minute, gently expand your awareness outwards from the breath to include your whole body and any sensations, feelings, or thoughts that are still present. Hold all of it with a sense of gentle awareness, like watching clouds float by, without getting caught up in them.
Check in, anchor with breath, expand awareness. Simple. How does this work so quickly to calm things down?
The sources explain that intentionally shifting your focus and breathing rhythm this way helps activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the rest and digest part of your nervous system, the opposite of fight or flight.
Okay.
This directly counteracts the sympathetic nervous system's stress response. Stress hormones like cortisol actually amplify craving signals. So calming your system reduces that amplification, making the craving feel less intense, less urgent.
That makes so much sense. Reducing the internal physiological stress reduces the perceived intensity of the craving. And tying back to that 15-20 minute window you mentioned earlier for crave waves, how can we use that knowledge actively in the moment?
That's where a technique called urge surfing comes in. This technique directly leverages the brain's natural process of extinction learning.
Extinction learning.
Yeah, it's the way the brain learns that a predicted reward or outcome isn't actually going to happen, and so the association weakens over time. You're basically teaching your brain that the urge doesn't have to lead to action.
Okay, so how do you surf an urge?
The core idea and the visualization that helps is to imagine the craving like an ocean wave. It builds, it peaks, and it will naturally subside. Your goal isn't to try and stop the wave that's exhausting and often feels impossible. Your goal is to surf on top of it, riding it out until it passes.
Just observe it, write it out like you're on a surfboard.
Exactly, and you use that knowledge we discussed. Most financial urges peak and then naturally subside within 15 to 20 minutes if you do not act upon them.
Right, that crucial time frame.
So the action is to simply observe the sensations of the craving. Where do you feel it in your body? What thoughts are coming up? What emotions? While breathing rhythmically, you are mentally riding the wave of sensation and thought without jumping off and acting on the urge.
So instead of thinking, I have to resist this, it's more like, okay, here's the wave of craving. I'm just going to breathe and notice it for the next few minutes.
That's the fundamental shift. The power of this technique, according to the sources, is that through repeated experience, you teach your brain at a very fundamental level that these intense sensations are temporary and manageable. They don't require action to resolve. You're providing your brain with new, powerful evidence that the urge is not a command you must follow.
HALT, 3-minute breathing space, urge surfing. Those are excellent for immediate, in-the-moment situations. But to really create lasting change, we need to work on the deeper patterns, right? Changing our thinking and our automatic behaviors over time.
Exactly. And this is where we move into cognitive and behavioral strategies, actively engaging your thinking mind to reshape your responses. One really powerful tool highlighted in the research is the thought record technique.
A thought record.
Yeah, it's a systematic way to challenge and restructure the automatic thoughts that often fuel those impulsive money cravings.
Systematically dissecting your thoughts. How does it work in practice? Sounds a bit intense.
It's actually pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. When you experience a strong financial desire or urge, you essentially become a detective studying your own mind. You record several things. First, the situation that triggered the urge. What happened? Where were you? Who were you with?
Okay, the trigger.
Second, your automatic thoughts, the immediate, often unquestioned thoughts that pop into your head when the craving hits. Things like, I need this to feel happy, or I can't afford not to buy it on sale, or everyone else has this, I should too.
The knee-jerk thoughts.
Right. Third, the emotion intensity you name the main emotion you feel. Anxiety, excitement, sadness, whatever. And rate the intensity of both the emotion and the craving itself on a scale, say from 1 to 10.
Situation, thoughts, intensity rating. Got it. Then what?
Then you move into the challenging part. Fourth, you actively look for evidence supporting the automatic thought. Be honest. Why do you think that thought might be true? Fifth, you critically examine the evidence contradicting the automatic thought. Are there reasons why that thought might not be entirely true or helpful in this situation?
Playing devil's advocate with yourself.
Kind of. Finally, sixth, based on all the evidence, you formulate a balanced alternative perspective, a more realistic, helpful, and balanced way of thinking about the situation and the craving.
So you're basically building a case, cross-examining your own impulsive thoughts to find a more objective view.
That's a great analogy. And the power, according to the research on this technique, is pretty significant. Studies show that simply going through this structured process typically reduces the emotional intensity of the craving and the associated feelings by 50 to 70% within minutes.
Just the act of writing it down and analyzing it like that can cut the feeling in half or more. That's remarkable.
It is, because it forces you to engage your prefrontal cortex, that higher order rational part of your brain, to gain perspective and control over the reactive emotional signals coming from the limbic system. You're literally training your brain to pause and evaluate rather than automatically react.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about setting up real-world tests for those impulsive thoughts? You mentioned behavioral strategies too.
Right, that leads perfectly into behavioral experiments. These are about providing your brain with concrete, personal evidence to disprove those automatic, often irrational beliefs that fuel impulsive financial behavior. A simple yet highly effective one recommended in the sources is the 24-hour delay protocol.
The 24-hour delay sounds exactly like what it is.
Yeah,
Just wait a day.
pretty much. For any non-essential financial urges wanting to buy something, subscribe to a service, make a discretionary investment, you simply require yourself to wait a full 24 hours before taking any action.
And during that waiting period.
During that waiting period, it's helpful to track the intensity of the craving every few hours. Just make a quick note. How strong is the urge now?
And what does the research show typically happens during that delay? Does the urge just get stronger?
Actually, the significant insight from the sources is that most people discover the urgent financial need they felt initially feels significantly less important, less urgent after the 24-hour period has passed. Often, the desire dissipates entirely.
That's powerful personal evidence, isn't it? You prove to yourself that the sky didn't fall, you survived without it, and the urgency wasn't actually real.
Exactly. It provides undeniable proof for your brain, which it can then use in future craving episodes. It learns that acting immediately isn't necessary, and that the urge will pass or diminish if you just give it time. You're building a library of experiences that counteracts the brain's act now programming.
Okay, so we're using thought records to challenge the thinking and delays to challenge the behavior. How do we make sure our financial decisions actually align with what's truly important to us, not just these reactive urges?
That's where values-based decision-making comes in. This technique creates a systematic filter for your financial choices by consciously connecting them to your deeper life values. It engages your higher cognitive functions to guide your financial behavior rather than just impulse.
Connecting money decisions to core personal values. How does that work?
It's pretty straightforward. First, you need to identify your top 5 most important life values. What truly matters to you. These might be things like security, health, creativity, connection with others, personal growth, contributing to the community, freedom, adventure, whatever truly resonates with you. Write them down.
Okay, get clear on your top 5 values. Then what?
Then, second, when you're considering a significant financial decision, take a moment to evaluate how well the specific decision aligns with each of your top 5 values. Rate the alignment on a scale, say, from 1 to 10 for each value.
So before I buy that expensive new gadget or sign up for that fancy subscription, I stop and ask, how does this align with my value of health? Score it. My value of security? Score it. My value of connection? Score it.
Exactly. And the rule from the sources that makes this really actionable is only proceed with financial choices that score a 7 or higher on overall value alignment across your top values. If something scores low consistently across your core values, it's likely a poor fit for you long-term, regardless of how strong the momentary urge feels.
Setting a high bar based on what truly matters deep down.
Precisely. This technique works because it shifts your decision-making process. It moves it from being driven by those immediate limbic impulses, the cravings, to being guided by your prefrontal cortex and your deepest intentions for your life. It naturally reduces impulsive behaviors that are disconnected from your genuine goals and identity.
Okay, so we've got immediate techniques, cognitive strategies, behavioral strategies.
Yeah.
What about actually retraining the brain on an even deeper level? The sources mention mindfulness and even physical interventions influencing brain structure and function.
Absolutely. The research really highlights the power of practices that leverage neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Mindfulness is a key area here for retraining.
What specific mindfulness practices are noted in the sources as being particularly effective for dealing with financial cravings?
Well, beyond the 3-minute breathing space for that immediate relief, the sources mention the RAIN technique as a really compassionate approach specifically for experiencing cravings when they arise. It's another handy acronym.
Okay, RAIN. What does it stand for?
R is for recognize. For the first couple of minutes, simply notice the physical sensations that make up the financial desire without trying to change them. Is it a tightness in your chest? A
Uh-huh.
restlessness? A feeling of excitement? Just name it.
Recognize the feeling. Okay. A.
A is for accept. For the next 3 to 5 minutes, consciously allow the craving's presence without resistance. Acknowledge it might be unpleasant, but gently use a phrase like, I notice I'm having a money craving. Allowing it to be there without fighting it or judging yourself for it.
Accept its presence. I.
I is for investigate. With kindness and curiosity, explore the experience. Ask yourself, what does this craving actually feel like in my body right now? Where do I sense it most strongly? What are its physical qualities? Is it warm, cold, buzzing, heavy?
Investigate with curiosity.
N. And N is for non-identification. Gently remind yourself, I am not this craving. See it as a temporary mental and physical event, separate from your core self. Visualize the sensation as something passing through you, like watching a cloud pass in the sky rather than something that defines you.
Recognize, accept, investigate non-identification. It sounds like a way of being present with the difficult feeling without getting completely consumed by it.
That's exactly it. You're cultivating a mindful distance, observing it rather than being swept away. Another fascinating technique mentioned, specifically noted as impacting thalamic function, remember our relay station.
Yeah, the thalamus. What helps that?
Walking meditation.
Walking meditation. How does simple walking affect the thalamus and cravings? That seems unlikely.
It does sound simple, but the practice involves walking at a deliberately slow, consistent pace for maybe 10 to 20 minutes. The key is to keep your attention focused primarily on the physical sensations of walking, the feeling of your feet connecting with the ground, the rhythm of your steps, and also on the rhythm of your breathing as you walk.
So it's mindful rhythmic movement, very focused.
Yes. The sources suggest this specific combination of rhythmic movement and mindful awareness seems to enhance the natural electrical rhythms within the thalamus. It also seems to improve the neural synchronization between those emotional, reward-seeking brain regions and the prefrontal cortex.
So it helps the communication flow better between the emotional and rational parts.
Essentially, yes. It helps that relay station, the thalamus, operate more smoothly, integrating the emotional input with rational thought more effectively.
That's incredible that a simple, focused walk could help train that key part of the brain involved in processing these cravings.
And the sources really emphasize consistency with all mindfulness practices. It's not about doing it once. The research shows that consistent daily mindfulness, even in short bursts, has significant measurable effects on the brain and behavior relatively quickly.
How quickly?
One study cited found that just 7 days of consistent mindfulness practice significantly reduced cognitive impulsivity, motor impulsivity, and impulsive decision-making compared to control groups.
1 week? That fast?
Yes, the initial impact can be quite rapid according to the data, and the effects seem to compound over time. Practitioners in some studies showed up to a 60% reduction in craving intensity after just 2 weeks of regular practice. They point to examples like high school students showing marked decreases in impulsiveness scores after mindfulness training, with those improvements being sustained over time.
Wow, that makes the commitment feel very worthwhile, knowing there's potentially a real, measurable return on that time investment relatively quickly.
Definitely.
What about our physical state? We talked about HALT, but how does our overall physical health tie into craving susceptibility more broadly?
Your physical health has a profound impact on your brain's ability to regulate impulses and manage stress, both of which directly influence craving susceptibility. The sources point to things like high-intensity interval training, HIIT, for example.
Exercise again. How does pushing yourself physically help with money urges, specifically?
Well, HIT seems to optimize your brain's natural reward system function. Research shows it increases levels of dopamine, giving you a natural mood and motivation boost, which can sometimes preempt the need to seek rewards elsewhere, like through spending.
Ah, so it scratches that reward itch naturally.
Exactly. And it also increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain cells. It promotes growth and neuroplasticity, including in areas related to impulse control.
So it's giving you a natural, healthy dopamine hit and literally making your impulse control circuits stronger over time.
That's the idea from the research. A protocol mentioned in the sources involves intervals like 30 seconds of all-out effort, followed by 90 seconds of recovery, repeated for maybe 20 minutes total, ideally 3 times a week. This kind of exercise is shown to naturally satisfy some of that reward-seeking drive. while simultaneously building resilience to stress, which is often a major trigger for cravings.
Trade the shopping cart for some sprint intervals. Got it.
Oh.
Seems like a good trade.
Another absolutely critical factor, maybe even more fundamental, is sleep optimization. Lack of sleep dramatically reduces your brain's ability to regulate cravings and impulses.
How so?
The mechanism is pretty clear in the research. Sleep deprivation increases cortisol, your primary stress hormone. More stress equals more craving vulnerability. And critically, it impairs function in the prefrontal cortex, that's your brain's main impulse regulator, the brakes.
So being tired makes you stressed and weakens the part of your brain that says, hold on, maybe not. That's a bad combo.
A very bad combo for impulse control. Tips from the research for optimizing sleep include trying to maintain consistent sleep and wake times, even on weekends if possible, trying to complete all money-related tasks and worrying before, say, 6 p.m. to allow your mind to wind down.
Create a buffer zone.
Exactly. Ensuring a cool, ideally 65, 68 degrees Fahrenheit, dark, quiet sleeping environment. And crucially, avoiding screens, phones, tablets, TVs for at least an hour before bed, as the blue light interferes with melatonin production.
Standard sleep hygiene, but with a financial self-control lens.
Right. And the research finding here is stark. Poor sleep can increase financial impulsivity by up to 400%.
400%. Just from bad sleep. That stat alone is huge motivation to fix your sleep schedule.
It certainly puts the importance of sleep into perspective for managing finances. Finally, blood sugar stabilization is also highlighted as important for preventing craving triggers.
Blood sugar, how does that connect?
When your blood sugar drops or is unstable throughout the day, your brain's energy supply fluctuates. It can signal a need for quick energy or a quick reward, which can easily translate into impulsive behavior, including financial impulses as you seek that quick fix.
Okay, so how do you keep blood sugar steady? Avoid sugar crashes?
The strategy recommended is to eat balanced meals containing a good mix of protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates. Think whole grains, vegetables every 3 to 4 hours. Avoid skipping meals or relying on sugary snacks.
Keep the fuel supply consistent.
Exactly. The sources specifically mention, including nutrients known to support brain function and stress regulation, like chromium-rich foods, broccoli, whole grains, magnesium-rich options, dark leafy greens, nuts, seeds, and omega-3 fatty acids from fatty fish like salmon or walnuts and flax seeds. These provide the stable fuel your brain needs for optimal functioning and impulse control.
So stabilizing your physical state with good food, good sleep, and appropriate exercise creates a strong foundation. It makes all the mental techniques we discussed much more effective, presumably.
Exactly. You're building resilience from the ground up, making your brain less susceptible to being hijacked by those cravings in the first place. Now, building on these foundational techniques, let's look at strategies for even deeper neural rewiring and proactively shaping your environment to support lasting change.
Okay, digging deeper now. Let's talk long-term rewiring. The sources mention some advanced concepts here that sound intriguing.
Yes, some of these delve into more technical aspects of neuroplasticity, but the practical applications are essentially about consistent, targeted mental training. One example mentioned is cognitive control training, which can involve tasks like a financial end-back.
A financial end-back task. That sounds intense and maybe a bit game-like.
It can be structured that way. The underlying idea is simple, though.
Yep.
It's like training your brain's working memory, its ability to hold and manipulate information, and its impulse control capacity, specifically within financial context.
How would you do that?
You might create a list of, say, 20 different financial scenarios or decisions. Then you practice identifying when the scenario you're currently presented with matches the one you saw n steps back in the list. You vary it, and maybe it's the one you saw 1 step back, then 2 steps back, then 3.
So, a memory and attention game using financial themes to make you focus and resist distraction.
Precisely. The research suggests that doing this type of task for maybe 15 minutes daily over several weeks can strengthen the neural circuits in your prefrontal cortex, responsible for holding information in mind and resisting those immediate distractions or impulses. It's like doing targeted reps for your financial impulse control muscle.
That makes sense. It's actively training the brain to handle financial information with less reactivity and more focus.
Another powerful technique rooted in neuroplasticity is visualization and mental rehearsal. This involves using your imagination consciously to create and strengthen new, desired neural pathways.
How do you apply visualization specifically to financial cravings?
You dedicate about 10 minutes daily to this practice. Start by getting into a deeply relaxed state. Then, vividly mentally rehearse successfully managing a specific financial craving scenario that often trips you up.
Play it out of your head.
Yeah. Picture a specific trigger situation. Feel the initial rise of the urge. And then vividly imagine yourself successfully applying one of the techniques we've discussed. Maybe you picture yourself pausing and doing the 3-minute breathing space, or confidently implementing the 24-hour delay protocol, or calmly checking your values list.
So practicing the desired response in your mind's eye, step by step.
Yes, and critically, add emotion to it. As you picture yourself successfully navigating the craving, consciously generate and feel the positive emotions associated with that success, the sense of calm, control, empowerment, or peace.
You'll win.
Exactly. You can even associate this positive feeling with a specific, subtle physical gesture, like touching your thumb and forefinger together, that you can use later as an anchor or cue during a real-life craving episode. This pairing of mental image, positive emotion, and physical anchor helps hardwire the new desired response pattern.
Creating a mental template for success and linking it to a feeling and a physical cue. That's very smart.
And finally, on the physical side of things, progressive muscle relaxation can be surprisingly effective, according to the sources. This targets the physical tension that's often a companion to financial anxiety and contributes to that feeling of urgency in cravings.
Relaxing muscles helps with financial urges. How?
Yes. The practice involves systematically tensing and then releasing different muscle groups throughout your body. You hold the tension for a few seconds, maybe in your fists, then your arms, then your shoulders, and then release completely, noticing the contrast between the tension and the relaxation.
Going through the whole body.
Yeah, spending about a minute on each major muscle area for a total of maybe 15 minutes. This process actively engages the parasympathetic nervous system, just like deep breathing does, which directly reduces the physiological state of stress and high alert that can amplify cravings and make you feel like you have to act.
It seems like so many of these techniques, at their core, work by calming that underlying stress response system.
They really do. Stress is a huge driver. Now, beyond these internal techniques, the mental and physical training the sources put a lot of emphasis on environmental and behavioral modifications. This is about proactively changing your external world to make healthy financial choices easier and impulsive choices harder.
Changing your environment to support your brain's new goals.
Exactly. Environmental design is key here. It directly influences how often you're triggered and how intense those triggers feel when they do happen. The strategy is simple but powerful. Create friction for impulsive behavior.
Make it slightly harder to do the thing you don't want to do.
Precisely. Remove physical triggers from easy access. Get credit cards out of your everyday wallet, maybe put them somewhere less convenient. Delete shopping apps from your phone's home screen or bury them in a folder. And aggressively unsubscribe from promotional emails that tempt you. Research shows this simple act can significantly reduce spontaneous urges triggered by marketing.
Just adding a few extra steps between the impulse and the action.
Yes. The research indicates that even adding just a small amount of friction can reduce impulsive financial behaviors by up to 70%. That's huge. Digital tools like website blockers, used strategically during vulnerable times, are also part of this environmental defense.
70% reduction, just by making it a little harder.
Yeah.
It's powerful motivation to clean up your digital and physical space.
It really leverages the brain's natural tendency towards the path of least resistance. Related to this is stimulus control. This is about modifying your physical surroundings more broadly to reinforce healthy behaviors.
Like what?
Maybe designate specific money-free zones or times in your home, like no online shopping in the bedroom or no checking finances after 8 p.m. Put visual reminders of your financial goals, a picture, a note where you'll see them frequently, and consciously make healthy financial tools like your budgeting app or savings tracker more convenient and visible than spending tools.
Make the good stuff easy to see and access. Make the impulsive stuff harder to see and access. Simple, but effective.
That's the core principle.
Yeah.
Finally, replacement behaviors are crucial for long-term success. This isn't just about finding anything else to do when an urge hits. The sources emphasize finding alternative activities that genuinely meet the underlying emotional or psychological need that the craving was probably trying to address in the first place.
Ah, okay. So figuring out what the craving is really asking for underneath the surface.
Yes, exactly. Is the craving really about needing comfort or excitement? Or maybe a sense of accomplishment or connection? Once you identify that deeper need, you can choose a healthy behavior that truly addresses it.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Instead of online shopping when you feel stressed or lonely, seeking comfort, maybe take a walk in nature, listen to calming music, or call a friend for connection. If you find yourself using obsessive financial planning to manage anxiety, seeking control, maybe replace some of that time with a creative hobby, exercise, or mindfulness practice that provides a healthier sense of calm. If impulse buying gives you a temporary thrill, seeking excitement, find activities that provide genuine, sustained excitement or a sense of mastery, like learning a new skill or engaging in a challenging sport.
Treat the root cause, not just the surface symptom. That feels much more sustainable than just trying to suppress the urge.
It is. And the sources wrap up this section by discussing strategies for long-term neural rewiring and habit formation. Building lasting habits requires consistency over time, as we've said. Habit stacking is a highly effective tool here, often highlighted in behavioral science research.
Habit stacking. How do you stack financial habits? Sounds precarious.
No, it's about stability. You leverage existing automatic routines to build new financial behaviors with minimal willpower needed. The simple formula is, after I perform my existing habit, I will perform my new desired financial behavior.
Can you give an example?
Sure. After I pour my first cup of coffee in the morning existing habit, I will spend 1 minute checking my budget app new habit. Or, after I close my laptop at the end of the workday existing habit, I will spend 5 minutes updating my spending tracker or reviewing my values list new habit.
Okay. You're hooking the new desired behavior onto an old, ingrained one so it gets pulled along more easily.
Exactly. It uses existing neural pathways as a foundation, making the new habit much easier to adopt and stick with. The sources also touch on the fascinating, though admittedly more complex concept of memory reconsolidation.
Rewrite financial memories. That sounds almost like science fiction.
It's a simplified way of thinking about it based on memory research. The core idea is this. When you recall a memory, especially one associated with strong emotions or a specific craving trigger, maybe a time you felt deprived financially, or a past impulse buy you deeply regretted, that memory temporarily becomes unstable or malleable for a short period.
Okay.
While it's in this briefly unstable state right after recalling it, the idea is to introduce new information or a new emotional experience that is incompatible with the old, craving-inducing response associated with that memory.
So I might think of a past situation that usually triggers a craving, and while that memory is open in my mind, I intentionally pair it with a feeling of calm control I've cultivated, or perhaps recall a time I successfully used one of these techniques.
Yes, that's the kind of approach. The goal isn't to erase the memory, but to potentially alter how your brain responds to that type of situation in the future by updating the emotional and behavioral associations linked to the memory trace itself. It's a sophisticated idea about how new learning can actually modify existing memory structures.
That's a really deep level of potential retraining. Fascinating.
It is. And finally, to make all this habit formation more concrete, the sources often bring in a simple but powerful framework. The 4 laws of behavior change, popularized by James Clear, but rooted in behavioral science. Applied to financial habits, the idea is to make healthy financial behaviors obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Obvious, attractive, easy, satisfying. Can you break that down financially?
Sure. Make it obvious. Use visual cues for goals. Make budgeting apps prominent on your phone. Make it attractive. Bundle a less enjoyable task like budget review with something you enjoy, like listening to music, or find a supportive community. Make it easy. Reduce friction for good habits, automate savings, and increase friction for bad habits. Unsubscribe from emails, delete saved card info. Make it satisfying. Create small, immediate rewards or acknowledgments for sticking to your plan. Track your progress visibly. Celebrate milestones.
Obvious, attractive, easy, satisfying. A great checklist for building any habit, really, including better financial ones. What kind of timeline does the research suggest for these changes to really take root and become more automatic?
The sources consistently emphasize that significant neural pathway strengthening and genuine rewiring requires consistent practice over time. They generally point to a time frame of roughly 30 to 90 days of consistent effort to achieve noticeable and lasting changes in behavior and craving responses.
So plan for about 1 to 3 months of consistent daily or weekly effort for things to start feeling different.
Yes. During this period, your brain is literally forming new synaptic connections that support the desired behaviors while simultaneously weakening the old neural pathways associated with those problematic financial impulses. Maintenance becomes significantly easier once these new pathways are well established, but that initial period of consistent application is absolutely crucial for successful rewiring.
It's an investment of time and focused effort, but the payoff is genuine, lasting change in how your brain handles money cues and urges.
Exactly. That's the promise of neuroplasticity applied here.
Okay, we've covered a vast array of techniques,
Mm.
from immediate fixes to deep brain rewiring strategies. But for someone listening to all this, maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed, the natural question is, does the science really back this stuff up? Does it actually work? Let's look at the evidence presented in the sources and also maybe address some common myths about money behavior that might be holding people back.
It's crucial to ground these techniques in evidence, absolutely. And the good news is, the sources cite numerous meta-analyses and controlled trials supporting the effectiveness of these types of interventions. For example, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which incorporates many techniques we discussed, like thought records and behavioral experiments, consistently shows the strongest empirical support in the research cited.
Strongest support. How strong?
Studies report large effect sizes, statistically significant impacts, and remission rates as high as 60% for compulsive financial behaviors like problem gambling or compulsive buying. Interestingly, group CBT approaches often seem to be very effective, sometimes even outperforming individual sessions, with structured 12-session protocols often being optimal.
So the systematic approach of CBT, especially in a group setting where you get support and accountability, is strongly validated by the data for these issues.
It is, and mindfulness-based interventions also show significant effectiveness, achieving medium to large effect sizes specifically for improving impulse control, which is key here. Randomized controlled trials provide compelling evidence,
Such as?
such as showing significant improvements in both cognitive impulsivity, like resisting distracting thoughts, and motor impulsivity, like resisting acting on an urge, as well as better financial decision-making overall after just 7 days of consistent mindfulness training. Remember that high school student example we discussed earlier, showing reduced impulsiveness scores? That's part of this body of evidence.
7 days again. That's fast.
And as we mentioned, the effects seem to compound, with some studies showing up to a 60% reduction in craving intensity after just 2 weeks of regular practice.
That's powerful validation for committing to even short, consistent mindfulness practice. What about things like neurofeedback?
Neurofeedback protocols, particularly ones focusing on SMR or sensory motor rhythm training, show moderate but measurable effects on attention and impulse control in the studies reviewed. What's particularly interesting here is that some long-term follow-up studies indicate that the positive effects of neurofeedback might actually increase over time.
Increase after the training stops.
Yeah, improvements in areas like inattention, for instance, have been shown in some research to grow from medium to large effect sizes when assessed 2 to 12 months after the training concluded, suggesting perhaps a delayed or cumulative effect as the brain integrates the changes.
Interesting. So some types of brain training might continue yielding benefits even after the active sessions stop.
Potentially, yes, according to that line of research. Now, looking more broadly at financial self-control strategies as a category, which includes things like setting implementation intentions, if I feel an urge, then I will do X, mental budgeting, temporal reframing, thinking about the long-term impact of a choice, environmental restructuring, and using pre-commitment devices like automating savings transfers, a meta-analysis across 29 different studies found significant overall effectiveness with a medium effect size.
So these practical strategies work.
The data suggests they do.
Yeah.
Nearly 90% of the specific interventions studied showed at least small positive benefits in improving financial self-control.
Okay, so across various approaches, CBT, mindfulness, neurofeedback, practical strategies, the science generally supports that these techniques can work to improve financial self-control and manage cravings. What's the biggest challenge the sources identify, even with these effective techniques?
The sources are quite clear and consistent on this. Long-term maintenance remains the most significant challenge across almost all intervention types. While initial results are often strong, effect sizes typically decline in studies that have longer post-intervention follow-up periods.
Meaning the effects fade over time if people don't keep up with it.
Often, yes. The biggest hurdle isn't usually achieving the initial change, but consistently maintaining the new behaviors and strategies over the course of months and years. It requires ongoing effort.
So it's definitely not a set and forget it situation. It requires ongoing practice and attention, like maintaining physical fitness.
Exactly. Like any health or skill goal, consistency is the key to making the changes stick for good. Now, to wrap up this science section, it feels really important to debunk some common myths about money and behavior that can actually hold people back from seeking help or even believing that change is possible for them.
All right, let's do some Mythbusters. Time for money beliefs. What's the first big one the research contradicts?
Probably the biggest one is the willpower myth. This is that deeply ingrained cultural belief that financial problems like impulsive spending or getting into debt are simply a result of moral weakness or a basic lack of self-control that you just need to try harder or be more disciplined.
You'll pull yourself up by your financial bootstraps idea.
Right. But the sources we reviewed strongly challenge this. They emphasize that financial decisions are driven by this complex interplay, often estimated to be up to 90% emotional and automatic.
90%?
Yeah, requiring systematic, brain-informed interventions, not just brute force willpower. Neuroimaging studies cited demonstrate a clear biological basis for difficulties with impulse control in the brain, a basis that is comparable to what's seen in other behavioral conditions like addiction or ADHD. It's not a character flaw, it's a challenge involving specific, influenceable brain circuits.
That's such a critical reframing. It removes the blame and shame and opens the door for actual practical solutions.
Yeah.
Hey, what about the idea that earning more money solves everything?
Ah, yes, the income protection myth. The assumption is that if you just earn more money, your financial problems will disappear, or you'll automatically be protected from impulsive behaviors.
Money cures all ills.
The research indicates otherwise. Greater wealth doesn't necessarily eliminate impulse control issues, and can, in fact, introduce or even increase certain risk behaviors. Things like lifestyle inflation getting out of control, making riskier investments, or feeling heightened pressure from social comparison. Financial cravings and impulse control challenges affect individuals across all income levels. They just might manifest differently in terms of what is craved or how it's pursued.
So the underlying pattern of craving and impulse is separate from the actual amount of money you have. Interesting.
Very much so. Next up, the education sufficiency myth. This is the belief that simply providing people with financial knowledge or education, teaching them how to budget or how compound interest works, is enough to change their money behavior.
Just give them the facts and they'll do the right thing.
If only it were that simple. While knowing the mechanics of finance is obviously valuable, the sources cite multiple meta-analyses showing that financial education alone plays a surprisingly negligible role in actual, sustained behavior change.
Negligible, really. All those financial literacy programs.
They might provide useful information, but the research shows that psychological factors, emotional regulation skills, impulse control abilities, addressing underlying beliefs and anxieties, plus environmental factors are far more powerful drivers of actual financial behavior than knowledge alone. Knowledge without the tools to manage the underlying emotional and impulsive patterns rarely leads to lasting change.
That really underscores why the techniques we've been discussing today, which target those psychological and brain-based factors, are so crucial. It's not just about knowing better, it's about doing better, which requires different skills.
Absolutely. And that leads to the final myth, the moral judgment myth. This is the tendency to frame financial difficulties struggling with debt, compulsive spending as character defects, signs of laziness or irresponsibility, rather than recognizing them as potentially rooted in treatable psychological or neurological challenges.
Like someone being labeled bad with money, as if it's an inherent unchangeable trait.
Yes. And again, the neuroimaging research directly counters this by demonstrating clear biological basis for difficulties with financial impulse control. We're talking identifiable neural circuits and imbalances in neurotransmitters that, importantly, respond to targeted interventions like the ones we've outlined today. Framing this as a moral failing is not only inaccurate based on the science, but also incredibly unhelpful and stigmatizing. It's often a challenge rooted in biology and psychology that can be addressed with the right strategies and support.
That really shifts the whole perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From judgment to intervention, from blame to empowering solutions. Okay, so with all this evidence validating the approaches and these various techniques laid out, how does someone actually start putting this into practice? It can feel like a lot. Do the sources offer a kind of roadmap?
They do. They generally suggest a structured, phased approach to make it feel less overwhelming and build momentum. Start with building a solid foundation in the first couple of weeks.
Wait, what does that foundation look like in practice, week 1 and 2?
The focus initially is just on awareness and establishing some basic immediate control. So your main actions would be start consistently tracking all your financial urges. Just notice when they happen, what seems to trigger them, and how they feel, maybe in a simple journal or app. No judgment, just observation.
Become aware of the pattern.
Exactly. Implement a simple 5-minute delay rule before acting on any financial decision, even small ones. Just create a tiny pause. Practice just one breathing technique daily. Maybe the 3-minute breathing space we discussed, just to get comfortable with it. And begin with really basic environmental modifications like removing just one or two tempting shopping apps from your phone's home screen or unsubscribing from a couple of the most triggering email lists.
Identify the urges, create a small delay, practice one calming technique, remove one or two easy triggers. This feels very manageable to start. What about week 3 and 4?
This stage is about building skills. You build on that initial foundation by adding more active cognitive and behavioral strategies. Start using the thought record technique for your most frequent or intense financial urges, maybe just one or two a week at first. Implement the full 24-hour delay protocol for all non-essential purchases you were considering. And crucially, work on establishing consistent sleep and exercise routines, remembering the research showing their powerful impact on cravings and impulse control.
Okay, so adding the thought work, extending the delay, and really solidifying those fundamental lifestyle habits that support brain health. What happens in week 5 through 8?
This phase is about integration and reinforcement. The focus shifts to combining multiple techniques and deliberately applying them in challenging situations where you know you're susceptible. Actively build social support systems. Maybe talk about your goals and struggles with a trusted friend, partner, or family member who can be supportive. Practice the advanced visualization techniques daily, rehearsing success, and begin implementing habit stacking to integrate new, positive financial behaviors smoothly into your existing daily routine.
Bringing it all together and making it stick.
Right, and the sources know that most individuals who practice consistently begin noticing significant reductions in craving intensity and frequency by about week 6. Seeing that progress can be really motivating.
That's great to know. Seeing noticeable results potentially within a couple of months keeps you going. What about beyond week 8? Is the work done then?
Not quite done, but it shifts. Beyond week 8, it becomes about continued consistent practice and gradually challenging yourself in new or more difficult situations. The goal shifts from just establishing the habits to maintaining and refining them for the long haul. If the foundational and core skills feel well established, this might be the time when you could explore introducing some of the more advanced techniques we mentioned earlier, like the financial end-back task or looking into memory reconsolidation concepts if they feel relevant to your specific ongoing challenges.
So it's an ongoing journey of practice, maintenance, and refinement, not a finish line.
Exactly, like any area of self-improvement or health. And finally, based on the sources, it's important to know when it's time to seek professional support, rather than just relying on these self-help strategies alone.
Right. What are the indicators that professional help is needed?
The sources provide some pretty clear indicators. Professional help from a therapist, counselor, or perhaps a financial therapist who specializes in the psychology of money is strongly recommended when financial cravings or behaviors are significantly impairing your daily functioning, work, relationships, self-care, when they're causing serious relationship problems, if you're experiencing thoughts of self-harm related to financial stress, or if you find yourself using substances or other unhealthy coping mechanisms heavily to deal with the stress of financial issues.
Those sound like serious warning signs.
They are. Other specific warning signs include feeling unable to function in major life areas because of financial stress or behaviors, facing severe financial consequences like rapidly escalating debt, bankruptcy fears, legal issues, or potential job loss, feeling persistently dissatisfied or distressed about your financial situation or behaviors despite trying these techniques, or engaging in escalating financial risk-taking behaviors that feel out of control. These are signs that the underlying issues might be more complex and really benefit from the guidance and support of a trained professional.
That's a crucial distinction, knowing when these tools are enough and when it's time to bring in expert help for deeper issues.
Absolutely. It's about using all the available resources effectively and appropriately.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together now. What this deep dive into the research, into these sources, really reveals is something fundamentally empowering, I think. Understanding the neuroscience behind money cravings transforms them. They go from being these mysterious, overwhelming forces that feel like personal failings to being understandable, manageable, physiological and psychological processes. Processes with clear, science-backed solutions. Your thalamus, your amygdala, your prefrontal cortex, they aren't working against you inherently. They're simply processing information based on evolved patterns, learned associations, and current stress levels.
And the research points to a clear, actionable path forward based on that understanding. It involves using those immediate techniques, HALT, the breathing space, urge surfing for relief during acute craving episodes. It includes cognitive restructuring tools like thought records, delay protocols, and values-based decision-making to challenge and reshape the thoughts that fuel the cravings.
Right.
It emphasizes consistent mindfulness practices like rain and walking meditation to build lasting emotional regulation skills and actually improve brain connectivity between impulse and control centers. And it stresses the power of environmental modifications and lifestyle changes. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, reducing triggers to build a foundation of resilience. These different layers of techniques work together synergistically to strengthen your self-regulation capacities and reduce the intensity and frequency of those crave waves over time.
And it's important to clarify the goal here, right? The sources aren't saying the aim is to eliminate all financial motivation or never want anything again. Money is a tool we need in the modern world.
Correct.
The goal is more about channeling your financial energy towards authentic well-being and choices that align with your actual deeply held values, rather than being driven by compulsive accumulation or impulsive spending fueled by reactive craving. It's about achieving genuine financial freedom, the freedom to make decisions from a place of clarity, intention, and peace, not from a place of reactivity and constant craving.
Beautifully put. And the scientific evidence we've looked at is compelling. These techniques, when applied consistently, work. Your brain has this remarkable, lifelong capacity for neuroplastic change. That means that financial cravings, no matter how intense or long-standing they feel right now, can be transformed.
The potential for change is there.
It absolutely is. The key isn't to just fight your brain's fundamental reward systems or try to willpower your way through it, which is exhausting and often fails. It's to understand those systems, work with them intelligently, and train them gently but persistently to serve your authentic needs and your highest values.
So the technology you need to make these changes isn't some external gadget or a quick fix you can buy. It exists within your own neurobiology, within your own brain and body. And the techniques to access and retrain it are proven by science.
The tools are available.
They are. The only question left, really, for anyone listening is, are you ready to reclaim control over your financial psychology? Are you ready to experience the profound sense of peace that can come from silencing money's constant, often stressful mental chatter? What single step, maybe inspired by something we discussed today, will you take to start that journey?